advanced degrees, a PhD right now.
Yep.
And so you're highly educated.
Correct.
So you're speaking this as somebody who has gone the education route.
Correct. Yes.
Well, let's talk about education. You're a longtime educator.
Yes, sir.
Why don't you just tell us some about your educational background to kick us off?
So basically, right from when I was in elementary school, I knew that I wanted to write or teach, subjects like math or put it in a way that people would enjoy it. I love people learning to love what I love. And so math was one of those things. And so as a child, I would write little notes about how to do well in math. And that was sort of hid in my heart somewhere. However, in Nigeria, it's one of those things where as you go through the education system, we get put in tracks. And I did go to the medicine. The goal was to the medicine track. The goal was to become a pediatrician so I could inspire kids to love learning, but just do well in life. People like Ben Carson had written books like Gifted Hands, Think Big, and those books inspire many kids in Nigeria and Africa, actually. And so that was a little bit of my background. So when I got to America, I got my degree in pre-med chemistry. I decided to then move into, basically education endeavors because my goal in life then was I was young and I wanted to make the most of my youthful years working with young people rather than, getting an advanced degree in my 20s. So I went and taught for 2 years at a high school. And then from there, I started a tutoring center. So I've been in education now for over 10 years, and I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed working with young people. And so I'm trying to see now how I can bring a biblical view to educating the young people, and especially those who are done with high school. But even before that, and we'll get to that piece a different day, but at least I want to really focus on educating the youth from their high school, later years, all the way to college in a biblical view.
And some of what I think God has done in your life, coming from Nigeria as well, is He's given you a different perspective.
Correct.
I think you have a biblical perspective,
Right.
but I think you have a different perspective. And
Right.
sometimes that's helpful.
Yeah.
To have somebody that can look at things from a different angle.
Right.
To say, hey, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And but I find it fascinating because I even heard Ben Shapiro the other day. He was talking about the most successful people groups
Yep.
in the United States.
Yeah.
A lot of times in the media, you'll hear people talking about like white men a lot,
Yep.
but they're not the most successful groups actually in the United States.
Yeah.
And Asians rank really high on there. But one of the groups that Ben Shapiro mentioned was people from Nigeria, and I thought, that makes sense with my life. Like a lot of the Nigerians I know are very successful. And so what is some of your education background there that's a lot different than what education people experience in the U.S.?
Before I give some of the more specifics, one verse that comes to mind too as you look at educating the youth and young people is, the Bible says in Ecclesiastes 12:1, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. And so in Nigeria, one of the things that I realized is that low standards are sort of not the norm. We are expected to, work hard, give your best in whatever you do. And you need to recognize that there are many, difficulties in the setting, in Nigeria that we grew up in. Our classrooms, for example, in some schools don't have fans that work, don't have windows, so you're sweating there taking notes, and there's 80 kids in the classroom, with one teacher. So it was not, I think of Booker T. Washington's quote, which is that sometimes success should not be judged by how many things you've accomplished, but how many obstacles you have to jump over to accomplish them. So I just find it interesting that, again, in Nigeria, we grow up with very little. A lot of the time, we had to fetch water and walk, sometimes many minutes. I think of, almost on a daily basis, 15-20 minutes of carrying water from point A to point B, not having constant electricity. Some of these challenges helped us. But we know that the challenges are there, but we are taught at an early age, essentially, to keep working hard, never settle for where you are at. Don't let your circumstance sort of define you. Do your best with what you have. Now, there are wealthy, families and people that go to expensive schools, but I'm speaking about the majority. We go to schools that are very, very, funded with very little, but have teachers that are willing to give their best. And so, so we grow up with that mentality. And so when we are put in a circumstance where, okay, now there's constant electricity, now there's water, we're going to run with it. And because we know what it's like not to have a lot of those things.
Right. Right. And you've told me in the past too that some of the rigorousness of some of the specific schools you went to as well really push students to perform well academically. Do you mind just sharing one example of that?
I think of what you value and how a lot of these schools we would be given, like in my elementary school, I went to an Air Force primary school. Well, first of all, one key feature to all of this is that morality and moral instruction was not separated from education. Our teachers would talk about honesty and integrity and living a life that makes sense, and sometimes quoting right out of the Bible. And so we didn't have this issue of teachers having to shy away from talking about truth in the classroom, which is one danger I know American schools have, is that some teachers feel like, oh, I can't talk about A, B, or C because of, they say, separation of church and state, which would be a good conversation to have in and of itself. What does that even mean, and are people misinterpreting that? But in some of these schools I attended, like Air Force Primary School, from first grade there was about 40 people in my classroom, and all the way through elementary school you get rankings of first, second, and third, and if you work hard enough you get the grades, you get an award on the speech and prize giving day, they call it. And so that rigor and that, you're sort of, there's competition. Of course, some of it can get unhealthy, but this was mostly healthy. I mean, there's no penalty if you don't place first, second, or third. However, if you apply yourself, they have a reward. And so that was sort of how we started out in elementary school all the way through high school. And so I think of mathematics, for example, one rigorous element. If you fail mathematics at a Nigerian school, and this ties to the biblical importance of foundation. If you fail math at any grade level, you repeat the whole grade. Like, so if I'm in 7th grade or 8th grade and I don't do well in math, I have to redo all of 7th grade. So even if I do well in English, even if I do well in everything else, but the point they're trying to make is, if your foundation is shaky, how will you build? And of course, Jesus teaches this. So we can see that the Bible calls for a certain type of instruction, which again establishes that foundations should be solid. But I feel like not every country takes that seriously. But in Nigeria, they take it seriously. Your foundation must be solid.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about biblical education and what that looks like. So what would, like, maybe do a little comparing and contrasting, but what should biblical education be like?
And some of this is not happening in Nigeria or America. And so I'm really glad we're having these conversations, because I believe we need to get the word out that we shouldn't continue with the status quo. We need to dive into, how does the Bible call us to learn? And so first of all, I think of people like Joseph and so on and so forth. They learn through their circumstance, which is a lesson for us to learn. So the first thing I would say, especially for older people, is we need to recognize that we've been given a life, we've been blessed with a life that God has designed us and wired us and created us to live lives that make sense and lives of purpose. So therefore, we need to ask ourselves, we need to spend time in prayer, seeking the Lord. Lord, what do you want me to make of this life you've given me? So a biblical view of education, first of all, has to come from realizing I was created for a purpose, and how can I use the gifts God has given me for His glory and for His kingdom in whatever field He takes me into. So
when you say older person, you mean outside of primary?
Correct, outside of primary. So I'm thinking of middle school, high school, or high school, college. But this applies to younger people, in some way, but that would be more of the parents, which we can address. But if I zoom in on just the sort of high school, college age, so let's say 16 to 24, which is the key era of life, someone's life, because you're figuring out life and direction. And so I think that we should not remove the importance of spending deliberate time in prayer, in the Word, seeking counsel for that direction. Because so you notice in my story, right from 3rd or 4th grade, right, and it goes back to Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, you talk about how God has wired us to do certain things, or we look at different parts of the scripture. You can know from a young age what direction you might be called to go. This idea that you have to be a teenager or college student, I think that's one error and flaw we need to stop with. Because God, I have, a son, for example, who loves animals, and you ask him about, what is this bird? And he can tell you this bird or this animal. And if he doesn't know it, he's going to research it right away. But he also loves law enforcement. So this is just a quick example of how this can all work together. And one day I was sitting there, and we pray, you pray for your children, and you think about, okay, what is God showing us in how we guide and encourage our children? And one day I was just walking around the house, and something occurred to me, and I called my wife and said, this is something that is amazing, but I think I've found a perfect career for one of our sons who is so excited about, again, law enforcement and animals. And I said, maybe he's a DNR officer, Department of Natural Resources, going out there, making sure people are abiding by the principles. But then you get to see some of these animals, and you get to do. So anyways, and I mentioned that to him, and he was so excited, running around the house. So my point is, he's young, but he has some direction.
People might not know this, but you're a medical physicist.
Correct.
And you're getting your advanced degrees, a PhD right now.
Yep.
And so you're highly educated.
Correct.
So you're speaking this as somebody who has gone the education route.
Correct. Yes. Yep. And by God's grace, I love learning and growing in that. And so when he said that, I was excited for him. Now I want him to go. I want to encourage him to go to college and stuff. And he's interested. I mean, he's working hard in his school. But do you see where parents again have to keep? Now, a biblical view of education involves spending that time seeking the Lord in prayer, in the Word, with counsel, seeing what gifts God has given us, and then seeing how we can use those gifts for the glory of God.
Well, I think you said something key, too, with the idea that we're made for a purpose and to glorify God.
Yep.
And I think we've actually lost some of that meaning, because there's plenty of jobs out there that don't have a purpose that betters society.
Wow.
There's even jobs out there that have purposes that destroy society.
Correct. Yeah.
And so so it's actually important that your job doesn't just serve you.
Yep.
And so, because the thing that you'll hear again and again, that young people hear again and again, is it's all about what makes you happy.
Wow.
If you can be happy when you go to work, then you'll never work a day in your life.
Correct.
And but actually, you have to be serving something greater.
Yep.
With that, even like we haven't even got to God yet, which is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Work as unto the Lord. The Bible says it again and
yes.
again. But the idea that you're doing something that betters society, and there's actually a verse in Ephesians 4, and I love this verse that talks about this. But it says, "He who steals must steal no longer, but rather he must labor." And then listen to this: performing with his own hands what is good, so that he may have something to share with one who has need. And so there's several ideas that are going on here, but the idea of performing with his own hands what is good, like what you're doing as a job or a career should do good for society at a really basic level. And then obviously not stealing, but giving. Like there's a swinging of the pendulum here for the Christian. But just that simple principle of doing what is good. Am I doing good with what I'm doing? And there's lots of jobs that aren't glamorous that do good. A janitor, cleaning a building is doing good for society. And so it doesn't mean glamorous per se, but I would rather have somebody doing that than doing what they love, but it not doing good for society. And so you see people that just want to make money. And if your heart is set on just making money, then the chance it's very easy to get led astray. And you're making money, but you're not doing good for society around you.
Wow. And that reminds me of 1 Timothy, where he reminds him about, the love of money is the root of all evils, and people seeking after that, which is an important piece of our discussion here, because sometimes people go to school thinking about just money, and that's a dangerous way to look at it. So I would really encourage, again, young people or parents listening, that again, we have to first of all, of course, seek the Lord in prayer, pray about the issue, as we should with any issue, and then spend time in the Word as we read and learn. Again, we get direction, and then seek counsel. So when you take that, that's number one. And then number two, okay, so what are the skills and the tools God has given you? What are the, you think about when people get to certain careers and so on, it's not just sometimes your skills and your tools, but also where you've come from in life and just the things you've learned along the way and how those things can help you in your profession. So I think those are all key elements, and I really want to encourage young people to don't go with the status quo. I just graduated high school, I have to go to college, I have to pick a random major. No, take a step back, think about why do I exist, and then go from that perspective, because your life is not an accident. You were made for a purpose.
And if you go off trying to just do what makes you happy, like the truth of the matter is, it doesn't even work.
No.
Because if you end up doing something that's not for the betterment of society around you, that you're not doing good, then ultimately you're not going to feel happy about that. It's interesting, isn't it? Like true joy does come from serving God, ultimately. And so you do want to find your place, to honor Him. And so, but because we brought up money, there is another problem with money, not just people desiring to be rich and falling into a trap of the devil, like it says in 1 Timothy. But the other problem with money is people spending lots of money for something that doesn't make money. That's another problem.
Oh,
so
yes.
Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and again, this podcast, we're trying to look at things from a biblical view. And if we talk about American college education right now, there's a lot of it that doesn't make sense, first of all, but then from a biblical view is not wise. And so, Pastor Steve had mentioned this to me the other day, and I just think it's very interesting. A lot of people would take student loans to go get a degree in a field that does not have the rate of return or getting back the money they spend. And this is a practical problem I want to quickly address. When you go into any field, it's good to plan. The Bible talks about, if you're going to go to war with another kingdom, you need to plan. And if you want to build a house, you need to plan. Mm-hmm. Why don't we do that with education? Mm-hmm. You want to go to college, well, why not make a plan? And especially those who are still in their earlier high school years, if you know you want to go, well, make a plan now. So I'll just tell you a quick side important note. It's not necessary to graduate in 4 years. I repeat, it's not necessary to graduate in 4 years if you want to pay as you go in a college that might be more expensive. So what about planning and being strategic and taking and working a job and then getting your degree as you go? But also, why are you getting the degree? What is the point of the degree? How is it going to help you? How is it going to help society? Now, some people say, oh, I love sociology and I want to just learn sociology, so I'm going to go to Harvard, for example, or some expensive university. First of all, why are you going to an expensive university if you can't pay for it? Second of all, you can learn certain things like sociology and so on without going to a university. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to add one more thing. Let's hit the hornet's nest for a second. I would say that you shouldn't study certain things at certain universities because it can be a danger to your faith if you're not established in the faith. Right. I repeat again, if you're not established in the faith, it's probably not wise to go into the lion's den and study sociology. So we know that there's a lot of sociology professors who don't like the Bible, don't like the teachings of the Bible. We've heard some that have gone viral here and here, there, and the other. But so we need to be careful with what we study as well.
I even say, to if we have any college students watching this, like I have college students right now in our church hearing weird stuff in their classrooms, and they're reaching out and asking me questions. And I just say, hey, we invite that. Like if you're hearing stuff in the classroom that challenges your faith, come talk to come talk to your pastor, come talk to some people that that have given themselves to the faith. If even finding an older, wiser woman, if that's what if you're comfortable, talking to her and get some perspective. Don't just try to navigate through it all on yourself, and don't let that professor be the only voice in your life. Like, he's in a classroom speaking to young people who are trying to, learn and grow at an impressionable age in their beginning of their career path.
Right.
And go talk to somebody else who's walked that road a bit and can challenge some of those things that are being said. And some of the questions I'm getting, it's actually in a religion class, and some of the questions I'm getting, like they don't hold water. And these guys are smart; they know it doesn't hold water. So their red flags are already going off. But it's great they want to come and ask those questions. So people need that. I think the church does have a place in this, and if you will, being that sensible and sound voice of the faith when students are being challenged in the classroom.
No, thanks for sharing that. And so if I can wrap up that last question, and that's basically, taking out money to do something that doesn't profit much is not a wise way to go. And I mean, people like Dave Ramsey have done extensive work in this. And so just want to encourage young people to please be careful. Look at what Jesus teaches on planning and deciding, if you want to build a house, do you have what it takes, rather than starting and then not completing it. And in this context, it would be taking out the money, graduating from college, and then getting a job that can't pay back that money. That's just not a wise way to go. So I would say seek out counsel, find out your tools, and then think about college as an investment. Make sure it's worth it.
And it's about stewardship. That'd be a biblical word. It's about not squandering.
Correct.
It's a biblical word. And it's about taking responsibility as well. So if you're in a situation where you have done those things, like you do need to take responsibility for that. I get really concerned, I think, and it's coming not just from young people, but younger, generations for sure, where there is a student, loan crisis. And the idea that we're just going to legislate that away. You know what I mean? Like, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's all kinds of laws that could be changed that help people make better decisions. But it's very concerning that if you think the way to solving this isn't personal responsibility, there has to be at some level a character element.
Yes.
To what we're doing financially.
Yes.
Sometimes talking finances is a bit taboo.
Yeah.
In regards to these subjects. And I remember, when I was applying for colleges, I get called back and congratulations, you're accepted. And oh man, yeah, I know that sounds expensive, but hey, guess what? We'll send you all the processes for you taking out loans.
Yeah.
And it would be no problem at all. And it's like, and the person I'm talking to on the other end is somebody like 2 years older than me.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
they're like, you can really get led into this stuff real fast and not be talked through it. And when we're called to, be people of much better stewardship.
Yeah. No, thanks for clarifying that. And if you, and Pastor Steve knows that I do a lot of writing and all that. So if you wanted the nitty gritty, then let us know that, as far as, you want to go to college, but you want to get into some nitty gritty conversations. Sure. In this podcast, we really want to just zoom in and give you a biblical view of how to address this, because it's very important to have it right from that view. And if you've, again, taken out student loans or maybe gotten a degree and owe a lot of money, please, this is not, of course, a condemnation. This is just encouraging the younger generation. And then please take responsibility wherever you're at. So, but no, yeah, thanks for letting me share that piece or that answer to be wise in stewarding what God has blessed you with.
Right, absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. And there is, you're a math guy.
Yep.
There is math involved in this. And it has to do with interest.
Yep.
And it has to do with compound interest, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, and some people watching this may not know this.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if you're older, you know this. But you take $100,000, or you take $300,000, and you put that in just the S&P 500. So what the market's going to do, and in almost 10 years, that turns into $1 million.
Wow.
So you're like, wow, investing can turn a great return. But here's the thing, that same principle that's at work there, compounding interest, works against you if that's debt and not investment.
Yes, sir.
Right? And so, I had friends that got into 6 figures of debt going to a Bible college. Yeah. And it's like, what on earth? You know what I mean? That's dangerous stuff. Yeah. And the Lord loves them. I'm sure they've learned and worked through that. Yeah. But, that compound interest, $100,000, with whatever interest rate you're having to tackle, that's a hard thing to overcome. Yep. And so you're going to need, what kind of job did you get out of that? Correct. That's going to, eclipse that, burden. Yeah. So you have to be really smart about this stuff.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'll add too, Pastor Steve, is I think we as a culture, we've really we've compartmentalized, okay, I'm going to go to school to learn this, and when I'm home, I don't need to learn whatever. Right. And it's like, again, you can do some, they call it, autodidactic. So, where you're a self-driven learner. Why don't you also make a plan and learn? And these are things I love to do, and I'm sure Pastor Steve does too. If you wanted, for example, Amos, help me out. I want to have a plan to study A, B, or C. Okay, sure. I'm sure there's books we can think about and people you can talk to. But the point is, you can learn informally a lot of things rather than going to a classroom and paying that money. So find a track that gets you a job that will feed your family and that will do good to society and be a blessing to you and your family. And then also look at how you can learn some things on the side. For example, we have a mutual friend and who loves working with his hands and does some work in plumbing. But you go to his house and he has a whole library of books that he studied, And so just because you might have a job where you're working more outside on power lines and so on, doesn't mean you can't go home and study some, John Newton or William Wilberforce and Noah Webster. You could do that. So please, let's not allow our jobs to stop us from being lifelong learners.
Mm-hmm. And there's education is changing so much now too. COVID, I think, accelerated this a few years with online learning and stuff. And so, but all of those things cater to self-learning. Yeah. And so people acquiring those skills of, some of that self-discipline is going to be really valuable for young people as they continue, yes, sir. To grow and learn. Yeah. And so, we got to teach people how to learn as part of the process, not just, give them the information. So, cool. We've talked about some of the biblical principles, at least, of pursuing education. And maybe let's talk a little bit more about other things that Christians should be considering when they pursue education, because it's not just money. It's not just getting that degree or that job, or even choosing a career path, there's other considerations as well.
Yeah, and I would say this is one thing, and I'm hoping that Pastor Steve joins me in this movement. I want to start a good movement, which is increasing the gap year increasing the importance of the gap year. What do I mean by this? So when you graduate 12th grade and you're not sure of direction, please take time off. Please take time to seek that out. Please don't jump into college. So the gap year, for example, situation, which is actually growing more and more. People like Jonathan Haidt, who I don't think would profess to be a Christian, but Jonathan Haidt wrote The Calling of the American Mind, and he was saying that is something that psychologists are recommending more. Right. As a society, we're noticing that a lot of young people just going straight to college is not a good thing for some of them. And so what if we encourage more people to take a gap year? So what could this look like? I'll tell you this, and then hopefully someday we'll do a more in-depth analysis of this. But imagine if I graduated in May of 2022, and then I spend the summer, again, reading, praying, working a job, and then in the fall, that whole fall and spring, maybe I could take some courses online as far as general education courses, but I'm spending time, deliberate time, again, seeking counsel, working a job, and then just figuring out more and more direction for my life. That year, I don't have homework, I don't have the busyness that comes with being in high school, so I have time to focus. And then after that year, I can make an intelligent, wise decision about what to do. So I believe the gap year is crucial. For some people, for example, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, I was telling my wife the other day that maybe we need more people who, if they want to be a stay-at-home mom, maybe spend some time with helping a mother out and just learning and growing in that way, rather than jumping into college again and that distracting you from what you believe you're called to do. And so I just think it's important that, guys and girls and, taking out time to seek the Lord, to be mentored, and then make that decision to maybe start in the fall of 2023, if that is what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, and then we've touched on this a little bit, but Christians, need to think about that greater purpose too. Like at the end of the day, Jesus calls every single believer to deny themselves, to take up their cross, and to follow Him. Yeah. And so there has to be you're part of redemptive history.
Yes.
And you have a role to play in that. Yeah. And doctor, lawyers, janitors, everybody in between have a place to play in that. Yeah. And it may be related, it may not be related, but you have there is a calling, a greater calling that we're all part of. It's called the Great Commission.
Yes, sir.
When God gave instruction to Adam and Eve, He told them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Yeah. Then sin comes into the picture, and now sin has filled the earth. But the Great Commission is the reversal of that, because of the cross of Christ, where He says now, having purchased for us that once and for all, that redemption, now he sends out His disciples and says, make disciples of all the earth. And so now the gospel is going forth and it's changing the earth. And so one day, He'll have a people from every tribe, tongue, and nation, singing, holy is the Lamb, and so there is a greater purpose in our work in this, and we should think about that, holistically as we pursue these things, and again, getting us out of that mindset of it's all about me.
No, thanks for reminding us.
Good. Okay, so let's talk about something a little more specific that I think hits on some issues that are going on in the culture today. But speaking up in the classroom, there's lots of, in a secular university, there's lots of bad voices. Even some of the stuff I'm seeing coming through the news recently about NDSU and just different things that are going on. Some of the stuff you've told me about emails and stuff messaging that constantly gets coming out, and I'm like, we're in North Dakota. North Dakota is has to be one of the more conservative states, in America, and there's some really worldly ideologies that are, just rampant, even in a conservative state like North Dakota. And so, talk to me about students speaking up in the classroom.
Thank you for that question. When I look at people like Daniel and Joseph, I see examples of people who stood for truth, even in a hostile environment. And when I think of the classroom setting in America, in many fields, especially the social sciences, this does happen in some fields in science as well. I would say maybe biology. When the topic of evolution comes up, it can be pretty heated, in terms of different viewpoints in the classroom. But generally speaking, in the social sciences, where people might have theories or ideas that are not valid, right? They're not grounded in truth. And so when the teacher brings up these issues, I really want, my hope and desire is to see more and more students speaking up from a biblical perspective about truth, and really, again, doing this with respect. If those, I know some people get concerned about, well, what if people think I'm disrespectful? No, do your best, pray, take a deep breath if you need to, and then speak with respect, but speak truth, and challenge these professors with respect. What I mean by challenge, again, is show them a different viewpoint. And I had this opportunity because my bachelor's was in chemistry, but I also had training in philosophy, and so I had a lot of opportunities where I would remind them. Now, there's two sides to speaking up. There's the side of sharing what the Bible teaches on an issue, but there's also the side of showing a person that what they're saying is logically inconsistent. And just sometimes all you need to do is just do that. And again, professors are human beings, and some professors will tell you, they will actually invite you. If you disagree, tell me. And then we have Christians sometimes just sitting there and not saying anything. We need Christians to speak up in love, because our professors also need Jesus. They also need to know the truth. And so please, it's my hope and my desire. And if you have questions, again, send them to us. We can maybe give you some guidance. But please speak up and show your professors where there might be a disconnect. And then if you're given the opportunity, bring the Bible and show how the Bible addresses that issue. And we can get into any specifics, either next time or if there's one that comes to mind now. But I just think that it's important that Christians speak up and not be silent in the classroom. For two reasons, actually. Again, I mentioned the first one. The professors need Jesus. But your classmates can begin to then see this person is speaking from a different perspective. When they go to lunch, they might have never heard the gospel. They might have never heard about truth. They might have never heard another perspective. Now they come to your lunch table and they actually say to you, please tell me more. Isn't that a blessing? Isn't that a great opportunity? So please, let's not keep quiet or allow fear to win. Let's speak up and speak in truth about whatever the issue is that is being talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is something about speaking up that once you begin to take a stand on something, and once you begin to articulate something, it forces you to really make sure you know what you're saying.
Yes.
You're doing. Like you know this as a teacher, when you have to teach on something, you learn that subject much better than when you were a student.
Yes.
And it just by its nature forces you to. So as you begin to speak up, it's going to force you to learn things even better.
Yep.
That's number one. Number two is it invites criticism of your own view that you'll never get unless you speak up.
Yes.
And so that'll only, you might get stumped a few times.
Yes.
But are you going to get stumped again and again and again? Or are you going to learn and get good answers to some of those objections?
Yep.
We actually see this in the life of Jesus. Not that he never got stumped, but he didn't get challenged until he began to preach.
Wow.
Repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand. And then the Pharisees would constantly try and test him. Now, they, were a little at a disadvantage there because he was God in the flesh. But I think there is a principle at work when you begin to speak at something. You will get challenged. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Yes.
And so I love it. When I get a question I haven't thought about on a topic I may be even very familiar with.
Yes.
And it makes you think about it differently. And I know even at the moment I don't have a good answer. I know it's only going to make me stronger. In the end. And so. The other thing is not just speaking up in the classroom, but speaking up with their peers in the dorm rooms, with their friendships.
Yes.
Being willing to talk about things, because this is just a simple aspect of loving your neighbor.
Yep.
Well, if there really is a battleground in some ways of ideology going on in these schools. And if we really love and are concerned for people, truth is liberating. For people, and so it saves them. Sometimes sin starts with a bad philosophy.
Yes.
And it can lead you down a dark path. And so sometimes speaking the truth in love can be incredibly liberating to your friends and family and so on.
Yeah.
So speaking up is important.
Yeah, and when you mentioned that, I actually remember being in the dorms one time in a common area back when I was in my undergrad, and they were having a conversation about sex outside of marriage, and I made a comment about, basically I said it was a sin, or that, oh no, I believe this is what we should do. And I remember some of the guys laughing and what, you believe that? They had grown up, maybe some of them thinking that this is not an issue, and then here they meet this guy who's like, oh no, we should follow God's word on this issue. And so there they were exposed to someone who had a different view but also had backing for that view. Again, let's not belittle those conversations, because that conversation, I'm just giving an example, could have helped or saved somebody from getting into serious sin. So please, let's not shy away from that. And when we go to these schools or wherever we find ourselves, as you said, we are ambassadors of Jesus Christ. That is our primary goal there. We want people to know Christ.
And people start to watch you too.
Yeah.
So you might not win them with that comment.
Correct.
But they're going to start watching your relationships.
Yep.
And they might say, hey, that guy has some really healthy relationships.
Yes.
Like, maybe I should,
Yeah.
maybe I can learn from him.
Correct.
Maybe he is doing something that works.
Yep.
So,
Amen.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Amos, thanks for talking to us about education today. There'll be probably many more conversations to come.
Yeah.
I think it was edifying, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Brother Steve.
Awesome. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.